Yeah. Good morning, everyone. We will start our International Young Symposium on the topic of extending peace and religion between Asia and Europe. And then the program is a joint program between SEAM, Southeast Asia Academic Mobility, and ACTER, and then with the support of Rumah Produktif Indonesia, Universitas Muhammadiyah Baru. Let me begin with the program. Actually, this is the bridging between Asia and Europe, how to have the relationship, how to have the collaborative program, and then we name it as the Young Scholar Symposium since this is the beginning to bridge between two continents. The second one, it might be the opportunity for us to know each other, and then as the beginning program, we will go further to discuss by the end of the 3 days program, actually what is the possibilities to go further. For example, Prof. Christians has the special issue in the journal. If we could have 10 to 12 papers proposal, that it might be we can propose together for the special issue of the journal, or another possibilities, we can have edit volume on the book, that at least because it is young scholars, it might be not in Scopus journal, Scopus books, or Scopus index, but at least already available online and indexed in Google Scholar and available in Google Books. So we don't expect in the high-ranking academic program, but at least this is the start, and this is the beginning for our program. One more thing, because this is the start, so it might be we will invite everyone who want to join with us, and then who want to collaborate for this program, since actually the institution or the program of EFTER will be closed couple days in this week, but at least through the network, through the kind of Prof. Christians, we will still have the opportunity to go and to learn about this counter-terrorism issue. And one more thing, this program actually, this is the initiative people-to-people contact. Yeah, at least we already have the contact, we already have to identify our friend expertise, and then it might be opportunity for us to learn and to have the collaborative program between Asia and Europe. So actually, it might be we don't expect too big program, but at least that this is the beginning for our activities. One more thing, I would like to introduce Universitas Muhammadiyah Baru, Muhammadiyah University of Baru. It is located in South Sulawesi, Indonesia, 2 hours flight from the capital Jakarta. Since Indonesia is archipelago, we cannot go overland from island to island. Yeah, at least maybe from Java to Sumatra or Java to Madura, because there is a bridge between uh, the island. But from Java to Sulawesi, still we need ferry, ship, and a lot of things connect to the ocean or to the sea. So this is the condition of the archipelago. So through the Universitas Muhammadiyah Baru, Muhammadiyah University of Baru, at least we can connect to more than 182 universities in Indonesia, because Universitas Muhammadiyah Baru belong to the organization, namely Muhammadiyah, and then the Muhammadiyah network of university, I already mentioned, at least there are 182. So this is opportunity for us to extend this kind cooperation between Asia and Europe, because the big number of university in Europe and the big number university in Muhammadiyah of Indonesia. We will start our first program. We will invite Professor Dr. Christian Kauner. Right now, currently, he is the director of ACTR. He will give us the brief information, at least about the EU as global counter terrorism. I would like to thanks to Prof. Christians allow us to bridge this kind collaboration between Asia and Europe, and with his kind um, invitation, we will listen to couple or many scholars from Europe to give us uh, the extension of the topic. I would like to invite Prof. Christian, and Prof. Christians, thank you. Time is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure and a great honor to have this joint initiative together with you, Dr. Ismail. It's really a great pleasure to conduct this collaboration between Europe and Asia. And I think this is something that is very, very important. So I'm absolutely delighted and I'm honored to have so many wonderful guests with us, also from Indonesia. And this is a country that I hope to be able to visit in the near future. So thank you so much for organizing this initiative. It's a wonderful initiative. Let me just tell you a little bit about our project before I start talking about the EU as a global counterterrorism actor. EU CTER is a Jomoni project. It's a Jomoni network in particular, funded by the European Commission, the institution of the European Union, and supported by the European Commission. So I also want to extend our gratitude here to the European Commission for funding us. It's a research network that is a research-led initiative. A research-led initiative both in teaching and research at the intersection between what we call in Europe the area of freedom, security, and justice, or EU counterterrorism, and of course, external relations policy here when it comes to the common foreign security policy of the European Union, notably here in particular with regards to counterterrorism financing, but also a lot of other activities. We will get to that when I talk a little bit about the EU as a global counterterrorism actor. But just to give you an idea of what we're doing in the network, we've done a number of really excellent and exciting initiatives, from different conferences to different seminars, workshops. We've also developed new teaching at the University of South Wales, in particular in relation to counterterrorism, also in terms of distance learning, blended learning, and of course, all in a spirit of interdisciplinarity of a variety of different disciplines that feed into this. We are focusing specifically here on the area of counterterrorism in Europe, counterterrorism in the EU, and of course, its links to its global role in terms of diplomacy and so on. We aim to discover and explain why and if EU counterterrorism cooperation with external actors, as part of the common foreign security policy of the European Union, has added more relevance. Is diplomacy increasingly a tool of counterterrorism, and how the EU is in a sense set to locate itself with third partner countries and its own delegations at both bilateral and multilateral forums. In that respect, we're hoping for substantial impact, hoping to increase public awareness of this cooperation between the EU and third countries and its diplomacy via the website. I also invite you to go to our website, www.eucter.net, where you have a description of all of the different aspects of what we're doing, looking at the various objectives of what we're doing, looking to contribute to a new understanding of the role also of the European institutions here, the European Commission, the European Parliament, the Council, the European policy areas here in terms of EU internal and external action, bringing in also a number of different international scholars, like this forum of young international scholars, generating interesting content for people on our website and organizing teaching modules and events. We've had a number of different ones, so I won't go through all of them, but you will see a lot of them also on the website. So in this particular way, so thank you very much for starting this collaboration here. It's a great pleasure and it's a great honor. So let me give you a little outline of what the EU does, in fact, in counterterrorism as a global counterterrorism actor. Myself and my colleagues, Dr. Alex McKenzie and Professor Sarah Leonard, we've also published a book on this. It's a book available with Edward Elgar, published in 2022, that deals precisely with this topic, the European Union as a global counterterrorism actor. In the academic literature, until we published the book, mainly the focus was on the internal dimension of EU counterterrorism. What we try to do with this book is to really look at the global dimension of EU action in counterterrorism, which is an area that had received comparatively less attention in research terms. Some scholars had termed it the absent friend, in fact, an early depiction that was quite influential in the academic literature. That gives the idea of a limited role, in line with the perception that the EU is only playing a limited role in foreign security matters more generally, because it doesn't lack that, it doesn't have all that military muscle that, of course, individual states have. But the book here established and, in fact, critically evaluated this global counterterrorism role of the EU in more detail. So what we did in the book, just to give you an idea, is in addition to the introduction, we outlined our framework of EU counterterrorism, collective securitization, the development of a collective security threat that is international terrorism, and of course, a global actorness of the European Union as a response to that, looking precisely of how this terrorist threat has been collectively securitized in the EU, meaning that it's achieved a shared framework of understanding in the European Union in general, where terrorism is seen as a clear and important security threat, an important security threat that is in fact international. The book then also outlined the various institutions of EU counterterrorism, whether that is the European Commission, and explaining the role of the European Commission in the process, explaining the role of the European Parliament in the process, the European External Action Service, and very young institution that was really created by the Lisbon Treaty, and of course the High Representative of Foreign Security Policy that has become more and more important. But in the area of counterterrorism, we also have the EU Counterterrorism Coordinator, who sits in the Council and is also a very important figure and in fact institution in this kind of realm. We then looked at three particular case studies where we looked at the EU's global role more generally. One, in relation to the transatlantic relationship with the United States. That could be perceived as a kind of gold standard of all the different activities of what the EU can and has done with third countries in counterterrorism. But we also looked at two case studies that are very, very important, of course, also for Asia. Here in particular, we've looked at EU counterterrorism in South Asia, notably the importance of the collaboration at the EU and the projects that the EU did in Afghanistan, but also in Pakistan. So we looked at the development of counterterrorism in South Asia together with the European Union. And we also looked at projects that the EU did in relation to the wars in Iraq and in Syria. So these are the kind of cases that we analyzed in the book, and then we kind of concluded. So this is just to give you an outline. But let me go into some more detail here of some of those issues that I've mentioned. If we want to evaluate the role of the EU as a global counterterrorism actor, we need to understand, of course, the involvement of the EU in counterterrorism. The way we aim to understand this involvement is through the theoretical framework of collective securitization. Collective securitization that builds on the framework of the Copenhagen School that originally developed the framework of securitization, how a security threat is constructed by a securitizing actor that is then accepted as a security threat by its audience, and only through that acceptance as a security threat it comes into being as, if you like, an accepted security threat. Now, collectively, this means is, of course, this is a framework that was developed primarily at the national level, primarily at the level of individual states. But how do you make a collective of states? How do you make a collective of states have a shared understanding of a security threat? Here, in particular, a number of scholars developed ideas about securitization within different regional arrangements. Scholars also looked at the role here in the African Union and, of course, also the role in ASEAN. Within the European Union, we can say the securitization was an important dimension where EU institutions may and indeed have played key roles as securitizing actors within securitizing processes that are meant to then also pursue further European integration. So securitization also as a means to enhance European integration here. Now, in order to assess that role of the EU in global counterterrorism, the second dimension that we need to look at is that of EU activeness. How can the EU become an actor in this area? And this relates back to larger discussions of EU activeness. Activeness here in terms of actor capability, meaning the capacity to behave actively and in fact deliberately in relation to other actors in the international system that Sjöstedt discussed, that is being termed actorness as such, and that in a sense develops a different set of criteria from what we've already seen in the academic literature. Notably, the framework constructed by Jupil and Caporaso that relies on 4 criteria: recognition, authority, autonomy, and cohesion. That is then further developed also by Brethren and Vogler that discuss the idea of opportunity, presence, and capability. In our book, we used an adapted version here of the criteria that are also used by Bradbeck and Reinhardt's criteria in terms of context, capacity, coherence, and consistency. Those were the kind of criteria that we looked at in terms of evaluating the EU as a counterterrorism actor. Now, let's go a little bit into more detail here. What does that mean, those criteria? The 3 criteria that we've used is context. Context, the way we've understood it, is whether circumstances have either enabled or have constrained EU action, and in fact, its recognition by third countries, by its partner countries. Do those circumstances enhance EU action? Do they enable EU action, or do they hinder EU action? Then the second criteria was coherence. Coherence, the question here in terms of the presence or the absence of shared values. Are there shared values, in fact, an ability to form and pursue preferences based on those shared values, established procedures along both vertical and horizontal dimensions. And then finally, capability, which we've defined as the authority to act, available instruments, and the deployment of instruments in the state or region concerned. Now, counterterrorism, of course, has a long history in Europe. We've had a lot of different continental versions of European terrorism for many, many years. In fact, much earlier than what you might find in the United States. We have, obviously, in the United Kingdom, we've had IRA terrorism and, of course, also loyalist terrorism that has, in a sense, existed for many, many years in the 70s and also then in the 80s. In Spain, of course, we have had examples of ethno-nationalist terrorist groups here, particular ETA that we can mention. We've had radical left-wing terrorist groups like the Brigate Rosse in Italy. We've had the Baader-Meinhof and the left-wing groups in West Germany at the time that were also supported, of course, by the Soviet Union and by the Stasi in East Germany. We've had the common European experience that really we've had different forms of terrorism on the European continent for many, many years, much earlier than, in fact, in the United States. We've also had non-European terrorism on European soil. Here I mentioned two specific examples. We've had the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, that has, of course, conducted a number of different terror attacks in different European countries. One of the very famous one was, of course, the Munich Olympic Games, but many, many others as well. We've also had the PKK, the Kurdish organization in Turkey, that also then conducted terrorist activity on European soil outside of Turkey. So over the years, the issue became slowly Europeanized. Europe got more and more involved, first as part of an intergovernmental cooperation, and then later as part of the European Union. We've had also the experience of the Council of Europe. The Council of Europe is, in fact, a different organization to the European Union, because until the 1970s and 80s, the European Community, as it was called, or the European Union as we know it today, did not have any legal competence on counterterrorism issues. The Council of Europe was another organization established in 1949 in Strasbourg as an organization for voluntary cooperation, no supranational characteristics like the European Union. But legally speaking, relatively weak instruments, mainly recommendation, resolutions, opinions, nothing of a binding nature. But it provided a political framework in which member states would address some of those political issues. And also important because a number of the legal instruments that were created by the Council of Europe Convention became later part of what the European Union defined as its legal acquis, that all new EU member states had to adopt. For instance, a Convention of Extradition, 57, 75, 78, the Mutual Legal Assistance in Criminal Matters of 59 and 78, the Convention on International Validity of Criminal Judgments of 1970, and the European Convention on the Suppression of Terrorism of 1977. All of those were part of the European legal acquis meaning the body of law that was becoming part of the European Union, even though it was not adopted as part of the European Union. It became part of the departure of EU action in this particular field, whereby interior ministers across Europe started establishing personal relations with one another, started developing collaboration, cooperation, and what you might call a European mentality, a possibility to increase efficiency in that European framework. It also provided some negative experience, and I'll give you one example where intergovernmentalism clearly did not work very well. The 1957 Convention on Extradition was ratified by the United Kingdom only in 1991. So from 1957 until 1991, for instance, this convention was totally useless in terms of actually apprehending and extraditing criminals, and it existed only on paper as far as the United Kingdom was concerned until 1991. So this is just to underline the drawbacks of this particular legal instruments, but the European Union later went and improved on those legal instruments after 1991. We had the interior ministers that agreed to meet regularly in the 1970s as part of the Trevi Group without legal competences, but part of this European political cooperation. That was later then also to include other policy areas like crime, drugs, migration, asylum, and so on, and later became part of the border policy of the European Union. We had the 1985 Schengen Agreement in the European Union between France, Germany, and the Benelux countries that abolished all internal border controls, provided for free movement of people, but that also spilled over into other areas such as immigration, asylum, police cooperation, and was ultimately then to be implemented by the Schengen Implementation Convention in 1990, but not fully starting to work until 1995 when the Schengen system starts to work. A Schengen system that is basically, with the Schengen information system, a kind of information system at its core, as a core instrument to provide the details of border crossing, visas, movement of aliens, police extradition, and so on across the different European countries. We then had the development of several more treaties in the European Union, the Maastricht Treaty of 1992, that provided for new competences, and of course the Amsterdam Treaty of 1997 that you might say provided really proper EU competences on those matters. Schengen and the Schengen acquis became integrated into the European Union. The United Kingdom and Ireland opted in, whereas Denmark opted out. And proper EU legal instruments for internal security, counterterrorism, crime, border areas, visas, and so on were in fact created alongside the legal concept of an EU's area of freedom, security, and justice that is in fact a legal construct that exists in the European Treaty. So this is an objective of the European Union itself, an objective that the European Union wants to create this area of freedom, security, and justice. As part of the reaction to 9/11, that is really when a lot of the counterterrorism acquis was created. We see after 9/11, in particular, we see that the EU develops an action plan that covers policing and judicial cooperation, airport security, cooperation against terrorist financing, emergency planning, diplomatic initiatives in the Middle East, of course, aid to Afghanistan and so on. But two things really stand out here. The EU becomes the only international organization that agrees to a legal definition of what terrorism is. Like, as you know, even the United Nations does not have a legally accepted definition of what terrorism is. The EU, after 9/11, becomes the only international organization that manages to get to a legal definition of what terrorism actually is. We also have flagship programs like the European Arrest Warrant that I'll tell you a little bit in more detail how it works. Subsequently, we have also the Madrid terror attacks of 2004, which enhances cooperation within the European Union. We have the bombings in London of the 7th of July 2005 that kill 52 people. That also continues to enhance then policy developments after both those attacks in Madrid and then also later in London. After Madrid, we have higher security in terms of airport transport, border controls, terrorist financing, and so on. After London, we see the development of a framework decision in terms of retention of telecommunications data. We see the development of the European evidence warrant that works a bit like the European arrest warrant, just works on the basis of criminal evidence. We see exchanging of information between law enforcement, exchanging police and judicial information, and so on. We subsequently then have more terror attacks in the 2010s. Of course, we have the attacks of Charlie Hebdo. We have the Bataclan in Paris, the Brussels, Zaventem attacks, and later other terror attacks like in Nice, like in Berlin, the Westminster attacks in London, Stockholm, Manchester, Barcelona attacks. All of them a series of sometimes smaller scale attacks, sometimes larger attacks that featuring the rise of various lone actors, weaponization of ordinary life. We see a number of shocks that were related to this particular type of terrorism that had become then the focus of EU counterterrorism and then enhanced the counterterrorist roles of different EU entities such as Europol, Eurojust, Frontex, and so on. Let me just give you that one example of the European arrest warrant, because the European arrest warrant really tackled one big problem that was always a problem as part of counterterrorism, that was extradition. Extradition was always a problem. You could imagine cases, for instance, between Spain and France, where ETA terrorists would not be handed over from France to Spain because they were seen as freedom fighters. And as a result of that, They may have been apprehended, but were not actually brought to justice in Spain for terrorist activities. Now, the European arrest warrant, in a sense, got rid of this idea of extradition, and it replaced it with an idea of surrender. Surrender, what used to be, in essence, a diplomatic procedure between different states, such as Spain and France, that was going between the judicial services and the Foreign Office, and then the Foreign Ministry between, let's say, Spain and then the Foreign Ministry of France, and then dealing with it as an interstate matter, as a foreign policy initiative, has now become part of an administrative procedure between different judiciaries. So the entire diplomatic echelon has now been abolished. It's now a direct interaction between a judge A, let's say in Spain, and a judge B in France that instructs the police to arrest and to surrender. We have no more diplomatic or political refusals of extradition, such as we had in France, Belgium, and Spain. We have also abolished what is the so-called dual criminality principle. No more refusals to extradite on judicial grounds. We have a mutual recognition of various criminal judgments across the European Union, similar to the European single market. And a legal instrument that needs to be implemented in national legislation, but does have effect before it is even implemented. It does not need to be ratified. It's not like an international convention that needs to be ratified by each parliament. No, the moment it is adopted, it has an effect already, and it has the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice. We also see increasing European intelligence cooperation, notably between the agencies Europol, Eurojust, and here, of course, overcoming this inherent unwillingness of member states to pool their full sovereignty here in this area, fear of disclosing sources, trust and keeping intelligence secret, and so on. But increasingly, we have those developments, and also at the European level in terms of the EU's joint intelligence center, CITCENT, producing intelligence analysis to support EU policy making, and of course, also the head of the 27 intelligence services that meet regularly as a counter-terrorist groups to provide for more analytical exchange. Europol here also as an important instrument. Europol as an agency that was created initially in 1998 and went operational in 1999 and started its activities in terms of enhancing cooperation between member states' authorities in crime and terrorism, also in terrorism investigations. Particularly here, it enhanced the number of investigations that stopped a number of terror plots, forming joint investigation teams with competent national authorities that will then aid the national investigations, and then also exchanging information between national authorities, and increasingly more operational investigative powers, even though we don't have like full operational investigative powers yet. Eurojust being the counterpart to Europol, something of a kind of a judiciary counterpart to Europol, enhancing the cooperation between the different judiciaries. And of course, now we also have the European Public Prosecutor under the Lisbon Treaty that called similarly looking at the number of different crimes that are also inherent in the Europol protocol, terrorism here as an important crime, with a separate legal personality acting through its members. So national jurisdiction matters, but also increasingly acting together as one institution. Now, how did all of this happen? We have the collective securitization here of terrorism in the EU after 9/11, why the EU, in fact, became involved in counterterrorism at all. We have the precipitating event, that is 9/11. That is, in a sense, what causes a lot of this activity. We see a variety of different securitization moves. Securitization moves, notably also by the European institution and European Commission, for instance, but also the Council Secretariat in response and an acceptance of those securitization moves by the audience, first by member states, but also by the general public at large, a formulation and execution of policies, and a routinization of EU counterterrorism cooperation and emergence of a new status quo that, in fact, underwrites those activities. Now, the institutions that we have here is, in fact, very crowded space. We have the European Commission that is very important in this landscape with its financial instruments that has a lot of funding for a number of those projects that are really helpful in terms of fighting counterterrorism. And of course, also the European Commission with its role in negotiating international agreements. We have the European Parliament involved with its role in negotiating international agreements as well, having to, in a sense, approve them. We have the Council Secretariat that is very important as part of, in a sense, providing for the agenda across the different European countries. And in fact, the EU counterterrorism coordinator, the Office of the EU counterterrorism coordinator that is located in the Council Secretariat, and it works very, very closely with the European External Action Service that is responsible for the foreign policy, foreign security policy of the European Union. Now, in terms of the transatlantic relationship, I've already told you, we see an increasing collaboration that initially grows from bilateral links. Bilateral links, the United States has very close relationships to, for instance, the United Kingdom here and the UK Home Office. 1979 police working group here that initially derived from fighting drug traffickers. And of course, the US internationalization of policing, FBI, and of course the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, with agents in Europe without operational powers, but with also secondment of Department of Justice personnel to Europe. We also have the US-Italian working groups on organized crime, the US-German working groups here, in particular, the strong bilateral links between the Bundeskriminalamt in Germany and the US National Criminal Information Center, and of course, the counterterrorist efforts of the Bundeskriminalamt, BKA, and the BFV, the Federal Office for the Protection of the Constitution, and the BND, the Foreign Intelligence Agency of Germany. We have also perhaps less well-known, very close links also between the United States and France due to historical links with Algeria, of course. France has always had tough anti-terrorism laws since 1986. We have its agencies, the Direction de la Surveillance du Territoire, DST, and the Direction Générale de la Sécurité Extérieure, the kind of foreign pendant that have very close links also with their counterparts. Equally, we have similar developments also in the Netherlands with strong Atlanticism and the Dutch Civilian Intelligence Agency, the Algemene Inlichting and Veiligheidsdienst, AIVD, also with close links with the FBI. Generally, so close links that leads to increased levels of cooperation between the US and Europe, building up new structures dealing with the terrorist threat after 9/11, developing new powers for police, increasing US legislation, of course, Europol also gaining great importance, and primarily really working on a number of different tracks from judicial cooperation here, extradition, and also judicial agreements here, in particular the EU-US Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty that was signed in 2003 that contained a range of different legal issues and so on. And we have similar developments, not quite the same legal nature, of course, but we have a number of different projects that also the EU subsequently developed in South Asia. We have a number of different projects that they developed in Afghanistan. We have a number of different projects that they developed in Pakistan. And we have the same thing also when it comes to the case studies of Iraq and in Syria. So in conclusion to my talk, because I know my time is running short and I don't want to overstretch the time. In conclusion, the external role of the EU can be seen as more significant than had been widely believed. Often, the EU was seen to be in the shadow of the United States, but of course, on counterterrorism, it has worked very significantly, not in the same way, not in the same kind of strength of a military nature that the United States has, because of course the EU is a much more civilian organization. It doesn't have the same military means that the United States has, but it has shown itself to be an actor that when the security situation deteriorates, whether that is in the United States or whether that is in South Asia, for instance, in Afghanistan, where it really worked for many, many years in Afghanistan until the return of the Taliban or in Pakistan with a number of different projects that it had in Pakistan, or in Iraq, or in Syria, it is not, in fact, an absent friend. It's perhaps not the strongest visible friend, in the sense that you don't always see the EU projects, because the EU is not always there, let's say, with guns and tanks, but the EU is there with projects, with funding, with different aspects of what the EU does. And therefore, it has been, in a sense, not an absent friend, but an actual quite present friend. A present friend, notably also in Asia, and continues to be a present friend also in Asia. And one that will deal with a lot of challenges in the near future. Here, of course, we have right-wing terrorism, we have Brexit, we have a number of different challenges, but nonetheless, we see there's been a lot of different developments that the EU has worked on. So I'll hand back to you, Dr. Ismail. Thank you very much for having had me to give this talk, and it was a great pleasure. And I look forward to the rest of the program. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prof. Questions already give us comprehensive explanations about how the European Union already come up with the initiative, program, and how to respond the global situations about terrorism. And somehow it look like that we have a lot of things to do since this is opportunity for us, and I name our activity as the Young Scholar Symposium, since this is opportunity for us to attract students from Indonesia to have the program that Prof. Christians running about in 4 universities. But hold on for your questions. Prof. Adlin Sila will not come online since he is in the hospital, but he sent me his paper and somehow to read, and then after reading the paper from Prof. Adlin Sila, he is a professor in Ministry of Religious Affairs in Indonesia. In addition, he is expert staff of Minister of Education of Indonesia. That's why, because he is a key person of policy of education and religious affairs in Indonesia, it is a honor for us to invite him to join. Fortunately, he is going to hospital, so he cannot join online with us. But hold on your questions after reading the paper from Prof. Adlin Sila. We will invite a friend of us. We have another friend, at least for the discussions. We have Arkady Eremin from Webster University. We have Peiran Wang from Vrije Universiteit Brussels in Belgium. And then we will have another point from our panel about this one. Let me start to read the paper from Professor Adlin Sila. Professor Adlin Sila wrote about the counter-terrorism and people society in Indonesia. And then, according to the recent survey data, roughly half of Indonesian Muslim members of or regard themselves as culturally aligned to either Nahdlatul Ulama or Muhammadiyah. 2019 survey, for example, found that 59% of respondents said that they were close to Nahdlatul Ulama, and 39% claimed to be an actual member. 11% said they were close to Muhammadiyah, and 7% said that they were member of the organization. If accurate, this would suggest about 105 million Indonesian Muslims identified with Nahdlatul Ulama and 90 million with Muhammadiyah. More modest percentage can be found in 2021 survey, which found that 12% of respondents listed themselves as active Nahdlatul Ulama member and another 18% as inactive. For Muhammadiyah, The figure were 4% active and 2% inactive. The data come from Lembaga Survei Indonesia 2021. This would mean Nahdlatul Ulama membership of about 70 million and 8 million for Muhammadiyah. All other Islamic organizations, both traditionalists and modernists, have membership of less than 2% of the Muslim community. Aside from their massive membership, both organizations have extensive assets and religious and social programs that reach far into the community. Large networks of educational institutions, from kindergarten to universities, medical facilities, from birthing clinics to hospitals and welfare programs for the poor and deprived, as well as disaster response teams. In short, these organizations provide a program for most aspects of community life. Some of their funding in internal rise, but a significant share also come from national and local governments. The involvement of Nahdlatul Ulama and Muhammadiyah in counter-terrorism programs is seen as part of their broad array of community outreach. More specifically, and both organizations regard themselves as paragons of a moderate and peaceful form of Islam, which they believe epitomize Indonesian Islam. Their leaders have condemned terrorism in strong terms, and their ulama council have produced the Tile Fatwa, religious pronouncements declaring the rationale of jihadis attack to the contrary of Islamic law and norm. From the early 20s, Nahdlatul Ulama and Muhammadiyah leaders saw a role in the radicalization effort, either as individuals or via their organization. Particularly since the founding of BNPT, senior Nahdlatul Ulama and Muhammadiyah figures have had a vital role as well direct involvement in programs with jihadists. Nahdlatul Ulama and Muhammadiyah have strived to promote a peaceful understanding of jihad and not have the concept automatically interpreted as violence, war as the heart, or killing qital. In Nahdlatul Ulama and Muhammadiyah school, teachers to educate their pupils about jihad but emphasize moderate meanings. There is no comment to murder or massacre as far as jihad is concerned. Sila and Philly and Lucansbull recently wrote that through counter-terror cultures, Nahdlatul Ulama actively mitigate terrorism ideology through its social media platform. In doing so, both the Nahdlatul Ulama and Muhammadiyah promote moderate Islam, wasatiyah or middle way of Islam, in order to prevent violent extremism. Numerous scholars have written on the importance of non-state actors in helping to achieve local peace building and reconciliation goals. The International NGO Forum on Indonesian Development is one organization that has conducted research on the subject. In 2019, it explored the role of Islamic organizations such as Nahdlatul Ulama and Muhammadiyah in countering extreme violence in Central and East Java. Its findings indicated the significant impact of CSO counter-terrorism engagement, especially among Salafist jihadist communities, on deepening the cooperative effort between CSO and state radicalizations. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening the summary paper of Prof. Adlin Sila. I would like to type the comprehensive paper over the chat box. You can see his publications about the Nahdlatul Ulama and Muhammadiyah, and somehow he wrote a part as a part of Indonesia. The area is in Bima, and then uh, Adlin Sila and Greg Paley describe how the situation over there in Bima as part of Indonesia. Thank you everyone to join and listening about this presentation, and we will move to the third part of our first sessions. It is about conflict transformation, peace building, and security. We already have here Arkady Eremin, yeah, and then uh, this is as the roundtable discussion, the first one entitled Economics, War and Boycott, Learn from Contemporary Conflict. At least we will have two-person to give us the insight or the beginning for this one. Yeah, I would like to invite Dr. Arkady Eremin. He is from Webster University. Dr. Arkady, time is yours.
Hello, thank you for your thank you for the invitation. I'm turning on my camera now, so I will then share the PowerPoint if that's okay. Let me just a second. I'll. Oh, wait a minute. Unfortunately, I'm not able to share the PowerPoint, but okay. That's the Zoom's problems, I guess. Anyway, so there's not that much to share anyway, so I'll just do it like that. So my title of my presentation is The Russian War in Ukraine and the Consequent Rise of Radicalism in the International Arena and consequently terrorism, right? Something that we are today discussing quite a lot. So one of the important things to consider when we're talking about the contemporary fight against terrorism and all sorts of radicalism is that the international system matters. There's certainly a good portion of the influence that the international system has on how often or how frequent we encounter things like terrorism and terroristic attacks of certain organizations, how the interests of different groups of people are often different to one another, and they cannot resolve it diplomatically. So the international system matters. So one of the important things today is that, unlike decades ago, the international system is really changing in the process of changing. Until around 2017, the United States of America have mostly been perceived as the only superpower of the globe. But the rise of China and the atomization of its foreign policy after 2016, about 2017, that kind of mark, has made scholars reconsider. Some of the top IR scholars, like Graham Allison, for example, is the author of the idea of Thucydides trap and how to implement this idea in the contemporary international relations, and the continuation, sort of a theoretical continuation of the power transition theory. And then John Mearsheimer, who I often do not agree with, but have to say that sometimes he's very, very correct. He's the author of the idea of the fracture of the liberal world order, and perhaps the biggest supporter of and probably I would say the avatar of the structural offensive realism. So these top scholars have invested their efforts in explaining how this intensifying rivalry between US and China affect contemporary international arena. I'm just going to give you a little insight into this. So just to be brief, after the electoral victory of Donald Trump and the attempt to pursue economic decoupling between China and the United States, these superpowers started to interact with one another in a way of a new bipolarity that is now being quite oftenly called, to illustrate the confrontational nature of these new relations. There are several arguments from both Mearsheimer and Graham Allison about why the international world order is changing and how is it affecting the stability of the international system in general, the stability of all the countries involved in it. Mersheimer, for instance, has a very specific set of arguments. Being an offensive structural realist, he does not believe in cooperation and international institutions as a sort of a foundation for a viable and sustainable world order, both of which they are the key traits of international system we had so far. And he suggests that we are seeing that the liberal world order, as he calls it, is being fractured. He also suggests that this international world order has been, by design, carrying the seeds of its own demise all along. The reasons for that are quite simple. He suggests that by ignoring great power politics, or at least not focusing on it enough, while declaring high liberal values and standards in U.S. foreign policy, U.S. have not seen that states like China and, let's say, Russia, for example, do not follow these rules, continuing to implement their realpolitik-based foreign policies, all the while benefiting the advantages that the liberal world order would provide. To be more precise, Mersheimer criticized the idea that intensive trade and other financial benefits aimed at countries like China and Russia have not moved them towards democracy even an inch, and they have not diverted them from unreasonable for neoliberals, what was perceived to be unreasonable, regional and global ambitions. So it didn't make them a responsible stakeholder, right, as he calls it. Mersheimer then argues that by doing that, U.S. pumped China and to a lesser extent Russia with money and resources, and EU did pretty much the same, by the way, while China never actually intended to move towards democracy and embrace the values of the liberal world order, having been taken advantage of these indulging, maybe at some point, behavior of U.S. Countries like China slowly but steadily pursued expansion of its capital and influence up until the point that power of China was impossible to ignore. So right now, given the fact that China is very powerful economically and even politically, it attempts to revamp the existing world in order to make it more structurally beneficial for the state. Finally, just a final piece of thought of a final piece of argument on the Mersheimer's stead. In his take on contemporary international rivalry for global and regional influence, Mersheimer does agree with the general premise that the new bipolarity term is to be, quite a fair word for the relationship between US and China and the international system in general. He specifically says that now it will get harder and harder for various states to maintain good relations with both China and the United States at some point, and they will have to choose a side, like, let's say, while US would count on states like EU, Australia, Canada, EU is not a state, but a set of states. China would then continue mobilizing periphery states like the states of Latin America, Africa, post-Soviet space, including Central Asia, and etc. Right. So countries like I don't know, let's say Indonesia, right? Since we are present here, we have to choose, and the choice will be again, according to Mersheimer, a very hard one to make. He does not believe in sustainability of protracted nature of this new bipolarity. He suggests that eventually one will prevail and the other one will fall. This will bring us yet a new international system. However, both in the case of China winning or US winning, it's not going to be the continuation of this system, right? Both of these countries will reshape the system once again. In case of US, it will be just a more stable, maybe more realpolitik oriented one to not allow any other contenders to rise. And then in the case of China, obviously, we'll see a complete revision of the whole of the international system. Graham Allison, another person that I mentioned, offers a bit of a different take on pretty much similar phenomenon. He perhaps is the most well-known popularizer of the power transition theory. So for him, the change of hegemons, right, and the change of international system layout is quite organic, right? The theory of power transition, again, the power transition theory suggests that change of leadership in the world is normal, and the only sustainable and secure international system ought to be unipolar, something he doesn't, that neo-realists don't agree with. Bipolarity or multipolarity, on the contrary, are the sources of instability for the people who support this theory. The central premise of this approach is that hegemonic powers have their certain life cycles, and eventually they will decline, while a new power will inevitably rise up to the challenge. At the point of their relative capabilities becoming similar and comparable to one another, their relations will inevitably become conflictuous, often leading into the spiral of conflict and war. Having revised the concept himself, Graham-Allison has utilized the term Thucydides trap to refer to a specific configuration of a security dilemma between the two superpowers. This idea suggests that the rise of China will inevitably trigger the aggression from US, potentially becoming the cause to a new world war. However, despite the original concept, Allison does not believe that the conflict here is necessary. We can, he suggests, somehow coexist, and it could go both ways without the need to resort to warfare. Let's say the possible scenarios of a peaceful resolution without, having to deep into the war is US just leaving China be and cooperating with China to a certain extent, maybe limiting Chinese economic capabilities and the degree of their investment in China, and seeing that if China succeeds and keeps on developing, the shift will happen in favor of China, but it will happen peacefully, and maybe it will be a more stable, more softer change than otherwise, or the U.S. will prevail and China will stumble and reach sort of a glass ceiling, and then the leadership will remain. But how does Russia have to do with it? What does Russia have to do with all this? How does the war in Ukraine affect all that, and how does it affect terrorism? You might ask. Well, here's specifically how, and both Graham-Allison and Mearsheimer kind of offer their own insights. Mearsheimer does not exactly focus on Russia too much, even though originally there had been time that he received Russian grants and has been in quite a deep academic relationship with Russian academia. But he only focuses on US and China specifically. His explanation of Russian aggression in Ukraine lays under the scope of offensive structural realism, but ignores many important facts, such as non-hostile relations with NATO states towards Russia being, primary, most of them being primary economic partners of Russia until 2022. However, his understanding is that countries like Russia, once again, will be instrumental in the fight against, between these two hegemons, between these two giants, because they would be, again, A, choosing sides, B, doing things like, again, what Russia did, the war in Ukraine, that undermined and helped fracture the international world order that we now had. Graham-Allison, on the contrary, offers a different conclusion, but it's quite similar, but it's still, in essence, it is different. In 2017, he assumed that that the Thucydides trap, usually how they arrive to the conflict is that there's a third-party provocateur, somebody who provokes the aggression between the two states, but doesn't exactly on their own get anything in return. And in 2017 on TED Talks, he suggested that there's not a better provocateur than North Korea that could potentially set off US and China against one another. And especially, that was the time when Kim Jong-un was teasing Trump on social media, if you remember. However, peculiarly enough, the provocation came from Russia in 2022 and the radical foreign policy moves of Vladimir Putin, which is, by the way, something we could have definitely originally seen quite far. Well, it did not ultimately break the relations between U.S. and China. In many more ways, it had broken the relationship between Russia and the rest of the world. However, the massive and rapid decoupling of the West with Russia has certainly revamped the existing balance of power on the globe, virtually adding Russia and pushing Russia into the hands of China as as a member of Chinese hierarchy, not a separate leading superpower, but sort of a secondary power, regional power under the Chinese leadership and economic dominance. So what is this new international system, and why does it breed more chaos? Why does it breed more conflict, more wars, and ergo more terrorists? The conflict in Ukraine has shown us that there are several new types of this new international system that we're in. First, the international organizations, NGOs, and non-governmental actors in general are weak and incapable. Their activities are declarative in nature with no real impacts on interstate politics. So the only viable actors are still states, and this is severely underlined. Economic motivation based on the second one is that the economic motivation based on assumption of state rationality does not always work. The economic disarmament is not a good enough tool set to offset the unwanted behavior in the international relations. Sanctions might be a problem for a certain country, but are not always effective. So it doesn't exactly work like that, like we anticipated. Third one is that international law and UN legislations are quite futile against great powers. UN is flawed against Russia, China, US, UK, right, and whatnot, France, right? These the powers, the great powers, so-called great powers, can do whatever they like, and really, when they do it, there's nobody who can actually punish them. Form, right? Number four, the states are more capable actors than any supranational entities. US, Germany, and UK are far more effective in helping Ukraine on bilateral level than on the level of EU as an entity or NATO as an entity. Um, Fifth one, there's just a few left, so don't worry. Being in a sphere of influence of US or even being in pivotal point in the region does not guarantee security. The same goes for EU. Real military capabilities of superpowers are often exaggerated, and combined with their indecisiveness, this makes it impossible for states to ignore their security and defense, hoping NATO or US will come to rescue. So the ergo we have, what we have right now, is remilitarization of EU in many, many ways. Even though before that, EU was lucky enough to be able to redirect it towards what might have seemed to be more important, like social well-being of the citizens and economy and whatnot. Next one is the spread of democracy is not a foreign policy priority anymore. The quality of democracy in the world is degrading in general, and more regimes become openly autocratic while pursuing regional hegemony. So this becomes more of a norm, right? If before that, the autocracies have been trying to mimic democracies. Right now, they don't feel compelled to do that because, again, the autocracies are more numerous and they're more openly autocratic. So it is just becoming more of a, more of an open norm to do to appear as an autocracy, which many states are, despite claiming that they're democratic. Ergo, finally, the most important one. The world will face more instability, violence, and wars over these few years, and that is, kind of a finishing point that this international system is offering us, is just more instability. All rivalries are being carried out with raw power, and many more actors, state and non-state alike, will recur to the usage of violence in the future, including open terrorism, what we see right now with Hamas and Israel, right on both sides, what we see with in Karabakh, right, what we see with the general intensification of the conflict around Taiwan and many other problematic parts of the globe, suggests that a lot of the stakeholders decided that, screw it, we can go forward and nobody will punish us, because this did not exactly happen in the case of Russia. Russia still persists, so why not take out our old rivalry by force? All this suggests that this transitional world order is, in essence, way more conflictual, less oriented towards trade and cooperation, and there's less globalization in favor for a new turn of anticipated regionalism. And a certain rise of interest to realpolitik principle will be, in formulating latest versions of national policies is due. But what does that mean? This, however, does not mean that the real school of thought has really won, and there is no point in developing other theories and concepts, and they will drown in radicalism, terrorism, and war. Not specifically. The so-called liberal world order that Mishheimer has classified previously was initially based on a half-baked theoretical knowledge on democracy, liberal world economy, and somewhat idealistic structural theory, right? Because we know a lot of things that were conceptualized were maybe great ideas in general, but they weren't exactly structurally implementable, might I say. So post-structural and critical theories, on the other hand, still offer a good degree of quality insights into the specifics of the international relations. And a post-liberal theory of international relations can certainly be of use for the future generation of policymakers and our scholars. The only problem is we have to figure this one out. This post-liberal theory doesn't come on its own. We have to think of it. We have to reinvent liberalism to be more corresponding to the reality of the globe. This time, however, IR theories should avoid structuralist mistakes that have made neoliberalism such a shaky foundation for world order. Thank you very much. I also had these references section, but since I'm not able to demonstrate PowerPoint for some reason, I'll just skip it. But I mean, there are works of Mishheimer, Carlos Escudero that I've used. There are some of my own works that I've used for this as well. And Filippo Boronelli, right, one of the people who I've recently met here in Central Asia, but originally he's from St. Andrews, is also somebody who is working on the things relevant to this report. So I do encourage you to Google them, right? In Google Scholar, everything's available. So I'm thanking you guys for this chance. And now the word is to you, Ismail. Thank you.
Thank you to Dr. Arkady already present how the currently situations about the security issue from his side, and it gives us a lot of perspective and somehow to enrich our understanding in terms of the counter terrorism and how the war, boycott, and economic situations. Hold on, if you have any kind of question and answer, if you have questions, we will put aside of question and answer in the discussion session. At least we still have 45 minutes to go. And thank you for everyone already join us for these first sessions of our symposium roundtable discussions. And I would like to invite Dr. Peren Wang from Belgium to present his topic, and at least will his presentation um, will enrich our topic for today. And then this is a good opportunity, unique opportunity for us since Dr. Peiran Wang, he resides in Belgium, even though that he earned his professional degree from a different kind university. So it is an opportunity for us to gain a wide range of perspective of this issue. At least we have 15 to 20 minutes, Dr. Peiran Wang, to present, and we will put aside for questions and answer. Thank you. Time is yours.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I introduced the geopolitical implication of economic sanctions and export control. In recent years, we found the trade and economic policy, the geopolitical turning of the trade and economic policy of the most international actors. For example, whether the United States, the EU, and the EU and okay, I'm so sorry. The EU and the China impose the restrictive measures on the FDI, foreign investment, direct investment, and the other international actors. The EU introduced the FDI security screen regulation, and China established the similar regulation, and the United States empower more authorities on its BIS, Bureau of Industry Security, and the OFAC. And I think with the new restrictive measures, we found there is a line between the distinguished with the partition adversary and friend. United States President Joe Biden claimed the like-minded alliance organize a new supply chains. At the same time, China takes the counterpart measures. Chinese company invest more abundant resources in its neighbor neighbor countries, for example, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Malaysia. So, certainly, Chinese international investment in the Europe and the United States decreased sharply. So we can find it's there is a new phases of the globalization. Compared with the past 20 years. At that time, the comparative advantage is the main drawing force for the international investment. To present, national security and logic factors are the new driving force for present consider. Cite some the restrictive measures on the international investment. On the other hand, export the more control to the export. For example, the Chinese and the United States chip wars. The United States imposed the more and more regulations and decree and on the limits the quantity of the chips export to China, but the same time the China invest domestic resources to develop its own supply chains on chips. To present, the competition is still ongoing and escalation. For example, the United States allied with Dutch, Netherlands, Japanese, and Taiwan organize its full alliance, and the other the to present we can find the China's countermeasure are limited. For example, for the to present, WTO is dysfunction. So there is my basic conclusion. WTO is international organization such as WTO has no enough power and resources to terminate the ongoing strategic competition by between the international actors, whether the economic sanctions or the export control. With the more and more regulations on the economic sanctions and the export control, we can find the world of economic has been separated the different subparts. The transatlantic states, the EU and the United States is including Japan, ROK, Republic of Korea, so-called like-minded states organized one alliance. The other, the China and some East Asian states form its regional regional economic groups. The third, maybe it is emerging, but not formed global source. To present, how to dialogue between this bloc and alliance. If as far as the chip manufacture is concerned, are concerned, if the China stopped the export to the raw materials to the other countries, to the United States and the EU, to the EU, the United States, how to manufacture it without the materials support. Second, if the United States totally stopped the export, the chips export to China, how the other international actors will penetrate this huge market. Then it hurts the manufacture capability of the United States for it with the shrinkage of the market percentage. The United company will be hurt for its export control policy. Then, as far as the technology development, research and development itself, if without the market verification, without the market purchase, it's the strength and the power of the driving will be declined. It is the loss not only the China, not only the United States. It's easily spilled to the population. As such, climate change is a common challenge to the whole human. For example, we are talking about the economic sanctions and export control. We will find it's on the international law, especially the international human rights law, the social, economic, social, and cultural rights. To the export control, if we not cite the restriction on the export control and the economic sanctions, it easily violate the ESA rights of the so-called ESA rights is economic, social, and cultural rights. So I think the international community, especially the so-called global South states, we should call for established some the standard and the international regulation to limit the application of the export control. For example, if you export some materials to the terrorist, certainly it should be prohibited by all of the states under the UN Charter. but it's some the dual use items and technology. Its port should be more clarified and more clear scope and user and some the technical standards. It is my opinion. Thank you very much. It's my talk. Thank you.
Thank you to Dr. Pairang Wang for his kind presentation about the current situation on somehow we can see the war, economics, boycott, and this is another topic that we could identify further. And then we already listened to two presentations, Dr. Arkady and Dr. Peirang, about this topic. And I would like to invite for a friend of us to give a comment. We have here Shakir Sofian. He is a lecturer from the Faculty of Economics and Islamic Business in Alauddin Makassar, Indonesia. And everyone, I would like to invite to give comments. We already have the keynote speaker from Prof. Christians, and I already read the paper from Prof. Adlin Sila, and then another one we already have the presentation from Dr. Arkady, and another one, the last one, we already listened to the presentation of Dr. Peiran Wang. So if anyone from us want to raise any kind of questions, I'm more than happy to invite everyone of us. And there is opportunity for us to have the discussions and Q&A up to 29 minutes, if any space for us. And then we will have a lunch break from 12 to 1:30, and we will start again from 1:30 to 3 o'clock. Yeah, and then another panel, we will have Dr. Alamgir Khan. We will have a friend of us from Indonesia, and another presentations. And let us have a comment or any kind of questions, and then Dr. Peiran and Dr. Arkady will answer for the questions and response. And before we end up the sessions, the first sessions, at least we will have another closing statement from everyone of us. Dr. Shakir, if you have comment, question and answer, feel free to raise the comment. Yeah, and then for those who are joining from YouTube, we are having another platform live on YouTube. You can write down over there on the comment. Yeah, and then I will read for your comment, questions to the speaker. Yeah, thank you. There is at least I would like to read the comment. This is the comment, the questions to Prof. Christians. How the involvement of European Union to the current situations in Gaza and in Yemen for the attack or for the conflict over there? That's the questions to Prof. Christians. And another questions to Dr. Arkady. What is the the current situation or the contemporary situation between Ukraine and Russia, since it is not the war affect to both countries, but affect to European Union, affect to Southeast Asia, since the import of noodle ingredients come from Ukraine. So it's already in fact to Indonesia. And another questions to Dr. Peiran Wang. How about the China or Tiongkok response about the war? At least we have three wars right now. It is between Russia and Ukraine. It is between Palestine and Israel, and the last things about the Yemen war between US, America, and British. I'd like one by one to respond from discussions. I would like to invite the first one to Prof. Christians. Yeah, Prof. Christians, are you still connect with us? If you like, you can answer the questions. Yeah, we put aside because somehow Prof. Christian is not available. So which one is available, Dr. Peiran Wang or Arkady? Want to answer the questions? Yeah, both friend of us, Arkady and Peiran, is not available too. But let us save these three questions of us, and it seems that we are in the end of these first sessions. I would like to thanks to everyone already join us for the opening keynote speaker and panel presentation. Before we end our first sessions, allow me to highlight our next sessions. We will have the second sessions for today. The topic is about conflict, transformation, peace building, and security. At least we will have three presentations from Professor Dr. Bhupinder M. Singh from India. And then we will have Dr. Alamgir Khan, and we have Leni Winarni from Indonesia. Three presenters will allow us to have such kinds of to enrich and entertain the topic. Thank you very much, everyone of us, and see you on 1:30 on London time or 9:30 on Makassar time or Kuala Lumpur. Thank you and have a nice lunch.